My money, Mr. Speaker, Chief Whip, Chair of Chairs, my fellow mayor committee members, officials of the city. I don't see the city manager. Is the CM around? Not here. CM, fellow residents of the city of Johannesburg, members of the media, good morning and thank you very much for making the time. Ladies and gentlemen, I joined the Democratic Alliance because I could no longer stand back and watch my country being destroyed by the ANC corruption, failure and arrogance. When I was approached by the DA to stand as the Johannesburg mayoral candidate, it was not out of deep desire to save my country that I accepted this undertaking. Part of my acceptance of this undertaking was my belief in Mmusi Maimani's vision of one South Africa for all. I had no political aspiration at the time and have subsequently turned down numerous requests to stand for leadership positions in the Democratic Alliance. My decision to stand as a mayoral candidate was not motivated by desire to hold political office, but out of a desire to serve the residents of Johannesburg and get our city to work again. This is why I've always said, when Johannesburg works, South Africa works. I'm a liberal. I've devoted my life to the advancement of the free market economy, and I'm in a fundamental belief in the inalienable rights of every South African as recorded in the Bill of Rights of our Constitution. I believe that the only way to expand individual freedom and access to opportunity is to grow the economy and provide more of our people with the dignity of work. And yet, I believe that a capable state has the responsibility to work proactively to address the legacy of inequality that persists 25 years after the fall of apartheid. Above all, I believe that my devotion to liberalism is not at odds with my desire to ensure that we live in a more just and equal South Africa. However, I'm gravely concerned that the DA I signed up to is no longer the DA that has emerged out of this weekend's Federal Council. The DA no longer represents the party that is able to achieve what I desire most, a movement that can save South Africa, unseat the ANC, and deliver one South Africa for all. Without this, I'm deeply concerned for the future of South African politics. The DA has taken a resolution at this weekend's Federal Council meeting to question the role of the party in governance relationship I find myself in, and the way in which we communicate on that relationship. This follows the expression of views by a number of DA public representatives that these arrangements are undermining the DA's message and contributed to its electoral decline. I regard this to be the worst kind of short-sighted thinking, even by the very low bar set in recent times. This position includes no perspectives of the residents of Johannesburg and what they want for the city. This has simply been ignored. I maintain that coalitions are the future of South African politics. For a political party to back away from such arrangements 18 months before a local government election that will invariably produce more coalitions is tantamount to declaring itself to be unsuitable for the future of this country. The election of Helen Zille as chairperson of Federal Council represents a victory for people in the DA who stand diametrically opposed to my beliefs and value system. And I believe those of most of South Africans of all backgrounds. I cannot reconcile myself with a group of people who believe that race is relevant in the discussion of inequality and poverty in South Africa in 2019. I cannot reconcile myself with people who do not see that South Africa is more unequal today than it was in 1994. I cannot reconcile myself with people who fail to realize that we have a patriotic duty to unseat the ANC and save our country before it is too late. With this grouping of people succeeding in their efforts to take over the DA, I have no doubt whatsoever that they will move to collapse these governance arrangements. At the heart of the matter will be the proper agenda that this multi-party that I represent executed. I've stood in front of halls filled with upper-income Johannesburg residents, without exception, understand the need to address the unsustainable inequality in our country. Despite this, some members of the DA caucus in Johannesburg have suggested that we prioritize the needs of suburban residents above providing dignity to those forgotten people who remain without basic services 25 years after the end of apartheid. It is clear to me that in the same way that the review's conclusions were determined from day one, any process of reviewing this coalition arrangement is similarly predetermined. I say this with certainty because I've had to lead this seven-way minority government without a solid mandate from the DA for the past 3 years. From the very first day I took office, this coalition arrangement has been undermined, criticized, and rendered nearly impossible. In every way, the DA has been the most difficult coalition partner in this arrangement. Despite the fact that coalition survived on consultation, shared programs, and recognizing the contribution of each member, the DA has criticized and questioned my approach. Despite the DA only winning 38% of the vote in 2016, elements in the party, some, have expected me to govern arrogantly as if I have an outright majority. I have to deal with people who draw the artificial distinctions between service delivery in formal settlements and suburbs as a binary, either or type approach. I've had to deal with individuals who'd rather spend more time on cutting grass than on fixing our broken and aged infrastructure which threatens disaster in our city. I have to deal with people who do not want me to implement the insourcing program that has benefited over 7,000 families and contained contractual costs merely because it was not DA policy. My response to the DA was, then make it your policy. Unfortunately, it is these individuals who have triumphed at yesterday's Federal Council meeting. That is why I have no doubt whatsoever that the collapse of this governance arrangement is a foregone conclusion. It is not in my nature to wait for people to push me. I have lived my life on my terms. It is for this reason that I've called this press conference today to announce my resignation from the DA Democratic Alliance effective 27th November 2019. It is on the request of the party leadership that my resignation is held off until this date to afford them the opportunity to identify a new candidate to fill this position. By so doing, I will no longer serve as a Democratic Alliance councillor, and therefore I'm required to resign as Executive Mayor of the City of Johannesburg effective on the same date. I've given this decision considerable thought, and I've been tortured by the circumstances that I've had to lead me to this moment. It is not in my nature to quit anything in life. I succeeded under the darkest days of our country's history when I was told that I could not be a businessman. However, I cannot be a willing participant in good conscience in a process that is placing the narrow internal interest of a political party ahead of the needs of the 5 million residents of our city, of the City of Johannesburg. The events of the first few months, and particularly this weekend, have required me to choose between my party and my country. I spent the past 3 years in governing, working tirelessly to rise above party politics in an attempt to unite a broad coalition. The events of this past weekends have left me at crossroads where I can no longer ignore the internal dynamics in the DA and the continued attempts to undermine my pro-poor agenda in the City of Johannesburg. I'm now in a position where I'm forced to choose between my party and my country. Ladies and gentlemen, as a patriot, I will always choose my country first. While the papers will spend many hours writing about who has won and lost this past weekend, the greatest loss belongs to the residents of Johannesburg and those who saw these arrangements as a brighter future for our country. Our multi-party coalition in Johannesburg achieved enormous feats in the past 3 years against all odds. Different political parties have put aside their differences and found common ground in the interest of our residents. This was possible because local government is a space where ideology matters less than service delivery. And ultimately, this is what our 5 million residents needed most. I'm also pleased to be leaving the city in a significantly healthier financial position. We ended 2018-2019 financial year with 5.3 billion rands in cash reserves and a sinking fund valued at 2.7 billion rands. This translates into 43 days worth of cash coverage, double the 21 days we closed on in the previous financial year, as all of you are aware. The significant reserves were not at the expense of service delivery, with the city spending 91.3% of its capital budget in the 2018-2019 financial year. I also believe that when the Auditor General releases his report at the end of November, this will result in improved audit outcomes for the city of Johannesburg. Our cutting back on frivolous expenditure through concerted austerity measures allowed us to increase the percentage of capital budget spend on engineering infrastructure and housing from 58% in 2016 when we took over to 71% in 2019, our current financial year. Arising from this, there's been a reduction of power outages in the homes of Johannesburg residents from 6.1 to 5.6 per household per annum. Our program of water pipeline replacements have reduced the number of leaks and bursts by over 4,000 per year, saving this precious commodity and reducing our losses. Over 900 kilometers of roads have been resurfaced out of the 4,000 of kilometers that lay poor and in very poor conditions. We have stabilized collapsing bridges which have posed enormous threats to motorists across our city, most notably with the M2 freeway, which will be reopened in the first week of November. We have made major inroads in the billing crisis in Johannesburg, a program that existed for nearly 20 years. The number of queries every month has come down significantly. The backlogs have been reduced and the average time to resolve queries has been halved. Facilitated investment in the city has ballooned to 400% of where it stood when I entered office in 2016, rising from 4.5 billion rands in 2015-2016 to 17.3 billion rands in 2018-2019. For the first time in the history of this metro, business has been brought on board as a partner rather than an adversary, unleashing the private sector's potential to assist the city in addressing many of its challenges. We have extended the operating hours of 20 clinics across the city, which now operate late into the night and over weekends. Hundreds of patients have received life-saving treatment after hours, and mobile clinics now take the services to communities situated far from primary healthcare facilities. Under this multi-party government, the city's first free substance abuse facilities have been rolled out, with 5 now operating in communities most heavily afflicted by addiction. The Inner City project stands poised to transform the skyline of Johannesburg, with 139 properties awarded for development and construction beginning in the first term right now as we speak. Last week, Council approved the expropriation of 37 abandoned factories across the city, with the potential to produce heavy housing yields by virtue of the size of the stands. 16 of these are situated around Alexander, where the need of such initiatives are sorely needed. Our forensic unit, established under the leadership of General Sibiya, has set the standard in the fight against corruption and wrongdoing. With over 6,000 cases under investigation, totaling more than 35 billion rands in expenditure, this unit has managed hundreds of arrests and dismissals of corrupt city officials. Our diversification of housing has seen the rollout of the largest site and service project in the history of the city, with more than 4,000 service stands due in this financial year alone. We have waged a war on the dignity of residents living without services in informal settlements, bringing more electricity and water to those communities than ever before. The city is close to welcoming 1,500 new JMPD officers who have been undergoing training since we initiated this recruitment in 2017. This will represent a 50% increase in the size of the JMPD force and greatly assist our efforts to bring law and order to the streets of our city of Johannesburg. In addition, our specialized K9 narcotics unit, another first in Johannesburg, is currently waging war against drug dealers. In many ways, the most emotional and difficult part of what has transpired in the DA is that I will not be able to see some of these programs through to their finality. I'm fully aware that the DA constitution entitles the party to terminate my membership immediately following this announcement. That is their right. However, it is my hope that I will be allocated to see my work through to the end of November because there are many pressing matters that must be finalized. Tomorrow, as some of you might be aware, I'm due to appear before the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs, which arises from my request for such an audience. I will be there to present how the city of Johannesburg and its residents are severely impacted by failing Home Affairs Department and its ability to protect the borders of our country. Next week, I will be lodging our court papers against the NPA to pave the way towards the private prosecution of those who have stolen from our residents and have been protected by the South African Police Services and the NPA. Also on the 30th of November, I'm due to hold the event to reopen the M1 following the extensive and emergency bridge repairs that have inconvenienced motorists since the beginning of this year. It remains the choice of the DA whether we get to see these projects through to finality. But it is my hope that I can be afforded the dignity of ensuring that nobody can reverse these very difficult gains. Ladies and gentlemen, serving as the mayor of Johannesburg has been the toughest job anyone can possibly undertake. I often joke with staff that saying to you that this gift job, you only give it to someone you dislike. It has, however, been the greatest honor of my life. I'm very much a human being and will be the first one to admit that I make mistakes. When human beings are trying to achieve enormous feats of change, they will always make mistakes. However, I live with my head held high, knowing that I've been honest, I've fought for the residents of the city, and I've taken every decision with their interest at heart rather than my own. I would like to thank my coalition partners who are here today, including the EFF, for their dedication to the work of delivering the dignity of change to our residents. I regret more than you that you will ever know that we will not get to see out this term of office together. Finally, and most importantly, I'd like to thank the residents of Johannesburg for this great honor. And I'd really like to say thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I've achieved many things in my 60 years, but nothing will ever bring me the pride and joy of seeing our residents benefiting from the dignity of service delivery they have been denied over so many years by the ANC government over the last 25 years, including pre-1994, 300 years of colonial rule, including apartheid rule since 1948. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for really giving me this honor to really serve the city. And also, my money, thank you so much for this privilege and this honor from the DA for affording me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Fellow South Africans, to the many members of staff of the City of Johannesburg who are here, to all the dear councillors who are also here today, to the leader of Gauteng, the provincial leader of Gauteng, John Moody, to the respective coalition partners that are here from the very respective parties that are there. I'll certainly be meeting with and communicating to the respective party leaders in their respective roles. I also want to say to the citizens of Johannesburg, to fellow South Africans, to members of the press who are here, today is a difficult day. It is a difficult day for the people of Johannesburg, because any decision that anyone makes or takes should always be motivated first and foremost by how we serve the people of this country. Herman Mashaba and I met a number of years ago. I would consider him a friend, a fellow comrade, and someone I've had the honor to serve with in the same political party, and ultimately to have had the honor to campaign with him and watch him serve the residents of Johannesburg. There can be no doubt, Johannesburg is a better place today than it was under the ANC. And certainly for the members of the staff who are here, working under the difficult coalition arrangement is a better place to work under than it would have been under the ANC. I think that is fair to say. I also want to emphasize the fact that when we met together, we wanted to pursue a vision of one South Africa for all. And that struggle must continue. That fight is one that we are not going to shy away from. We took our task to say it is possible for black South Africans and white South Africans to work together. We pursued the task of saying the vision of one South Africa for all is one where we address historical injustices. None could be more prevalent than here in Johannesburg, where we inherited a city where the apartheid spatial legacy was in place. And it is the team that is here under Herman Mashaba who worked hard to advance that, starting with the inner city rejuvenation program and ultimately the investment that took place in the inner city. Continuing with the work of ensuring that communities that were without clinics, that were without road infrastructure, housing, were developed. I certainly, as someone who grew up in Dobsonville, Soweto, and a resident of Johannesburg, have watched with great interest to see the developments that have taken place in the city, and never have I ever been proud that as a child who grew up under this apartheid city in the 80s, I could one day watch it be led in a liberal democratic manner by the party and by Herman Mashaba. It is indeed the hope and the dream that we work towards and we sought to advance. The project is not finished. The work must continue. The party itself will take consideration of the announcement today by Mayor Mashaba. That will then serve before a federal executive to which considerations need to be made. I want to categorically state, certainly as a job that I have put as leader of the DA, have supported and stood firm behind the coalition arrangements here in Johannesburg. Have always maintained that even as tough as it is, we never got an outright majority, and it became important that we work with parties so that we can advance that dream. That dream of building an inclusive city, but also removing the ANC. None of us joined politics to save the ANC or a faction of the ANC. We joined politics because we believed fundamentally we could bring change, address historical injustices, and ultimately work hard to create an economy that is inclusive for all South Africans. It is in that way that we want to build one South Africa for all. The events that have taken place in the last number of days are democratic. They in and of themselves will be matters that the organization that the DA is will deal with and then begin to charter a way forward. I respect Herman Mashaba's decision and note the communication that he has done today. I came, and as many of us, met with Ndate Mashaba to discuss the decision. And it will certainly be my view that I want for Herman Mashaba to be able to finish the term. I would have preferred for the 5 years, but in the context of the circumstances, ultimately to the 30th of November. 27. Upon which the projects that he has begun, a proper handover process must be in place. The party will then decide and undertake what happens in government itself. And I want to say to the people of Johannesburg, the staff who are here, our commitment maintains that we want to maintain the coalition arrangements as they are. We want this government to work. We want this government to continue the work that it began and must continue to do. Because we didn't go into this to, at this hour, reverse our gains and really invite a party that truly had captured the city to return into government. So we will do what we need to do and ask the organization to focus its future in that regard. In closing, fellow South Africans, I want to thank the MMCs who are here. Qhubekani nomsebenzi. Tswellang pele. Awubuye umthetho. Arisebenzeni. And ultimately, when I look at the capex figures in the city of Johannesburg, and I realize they're the highest they've ever been, know that your work has been extraordinary for the people of this country. To my friend, colleague, I want to thank Mekoni, Koni Mashaba and Herman Mashaba, and myself and my wife have certainly built a very strong friendship over the last number of years. We remain so. I want to thank you. I want to thank you not only as a resident of Johannesburg, but I want to thank you as a fellow South African. Thank you for always driving the ambition to serve our country and serve our people. I know you'll be taking some time out in the next while to reflect as to what the next journey will look like. And our paths together certainly will continue to charter a journey of building this one South Africa, because that is indeed our commitment. And on behalf of all South Africans, certainly for myself, and I want to say, God bless you. You are a hero. You are a hero to me. You are a hero to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this press conference. Please note that hard copies of the speech may be obtained on the left and the front over here. But please
Well, there you have it. Herman Mashaba has announced his resignation as the mayor of Johannesburg and as a member of the Democratic Alliance. It follows the election of Helen Zille as the party's Federal Council chairperson on Sunday. Mashaba has previously indicated that he would call it quits should what he calls the right-wing aligned DA faction win. He took office as the Johannesburg mayor in 2016. Speaking during a media briefing in Johannesburg, Mashaba says he's deeply concerned about the politics of the Democratic Alliance. He says he will cease serving as mayor from the 27th of November. We've been speaking to him the entire morning, and Mike Siluma has graciously agreed to stay on with us. 2 resignations from the party and from the city.
I think that if you look at the face of Mmusi Maimane in this press conference, he was totally crestfallen. And I think that he understands that this may not be the last of the departures of the people who support him, his lieutenants. Because although he says that the work must carry on in the DA, in government, etc., how is it going to,
this
carry
work
on?
Depended on the leader.
It depends on the leader, but it depends on him having lieutenants who support him. People who share his vision. And I think that Herman Mashaba was one of the critical people in that group of people who were supporting him.
But this also presents an interesting opportunity for Mmusi Maimane to almost the first opportunity for him after the meeting of the weekend to stamp his authority and say the coalition agreements stand and we're continuing on that.
Yes, that's his view. But if you listen very carefully to Herman Mashaba, a lot of people would assume that the only reason or the main reason he's leaving is because of the election of Helen Zille on the weekend.
Yeah.
But actually, that's just the camel that breaks the straw that breaks the camel's back, as it were, because he is complaining essentially in his speech about being undermined at every turn in relation to the coalition government in Johannesburg. So that really is his issue.
Let's unpack that issue a bit. He talks about a dear constituency that expects him to focus on how the grass is cut instead of real issues of people who are living in inequality. He talks about the insourcing program that he introduced, that he says created jobs, but it was not necessarily DA policy, which meant there were butting heads with people within the DA. He says the collapse of the coalition was a foregone conclusion. But he also says that at every moment that they got, they were undermining his work. Mm-hmm.
Yes, earlier on, we were talking about the ideological orientation of the two factions in the DA, and the orientation of people like Mmusi Maimane and Herman Mashaba is what Herman Mashaba just called now the pro-poor agenda.
Yeah.
Now that is anathema to the racial liberals in the DA, because it talks about racial issues, it talks about poverty, and they are not very comfortable confronting those issues. So they really don't like people who talk about those kinds. But essentially, what is happening here is that both the battle in the DA is actually going to intensify.
Yeah.
Despite the departure of Herman Mashaba, even in Joburg, because the question, and I presume we will come to it, the question is, as Herman Mashaba is leaving, who is going to replace him? And for the coalition that Mmusi says he's committed to, for that coalition to work, it means that that person that they're going to put forward as the candidate mayor will have to be acceptable to the EFF.
Yeah, he started off by clearing it out right at the beginning, relating to that article that you wrote saying, I'm a liberal, and saying, I've lived my life on my own terms. But listening to his speech now, wouldn't one then say, the DA is justified to want people like Herman and Mmusi out, because they state publicly the things that they want, which are not the things that we want.
Yeah, I don't think there's a justification. I believe that what is happening in the DA is, as I was saying, is part of a broader pushback about transformation in this country, about the need to eliminate poverty, about the need to close the wealth gap in the country, about the need to spread out opportunities for everyone.
Inclusivity.
Across inclusivity. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that this is just we should treat it as an internal, in-house tiff in the DA, because the position of the people who are opposed to Mmusi Maimane and Herman Mashaba, it is linked to the likes of the Freedom Front, to Solidarity, to the Institute of Race Relations, etc., which is a very influential...
Why won't they see that that's the national question and not a party question?
Well, they don't, because it is self-interest.
It serves them.
Yes, it is self-interest, because for as long as they refuse to confront that reality, it means that the pressure for corrective action, the pressure for a redistribution of resources in the country then will fall away or will be minimized.
What does it say about the person that he promises to do something and follows through?
Oh yeah, of course, the big difference between someone like Herman Mashaba and most other politicians is that he does not need the job.
Yeah.
That he went in on a particular understanding, and he must be feeling very betrayed that he thought that he's going into the DA because his views are needed, his contribution is needed, but it turns out once he's inside that he needs to operate under the tutelage of the racial liberals in the
fact,
DA.
that's exactly what he said at some point in the conversation when he was saying that events at the weekend, he says the election of Helen Zille He said it that way. The election of Helen Zille represents a victory for people opposed to my value system.
Yes. His view, essentially, it just goes to the depth of division that is occurring in the DA in terms of it is way beyond personalities. You know, people may say, well, it's because of Helen Zille, but actually it's beyond that. It is about what kind of contribution does a party like the DA want to make in the reconstruction of South Africa?
Yeah.
Does it want to hold back that progress, or does it want to speed it up?
When you're Herman Mashaba and you join the Democratic Alliance, and your sentiment is that it's unsustainable, he went into the DA to stem the unsustainable inequality in our country. Why join the DA and not the EFF for such a mission?
It's because he's a liberal. He truly does believe in free enterprise, for example. He believes in the individual freedoms. He believes in the rule of law. He believes in all of those things that conventional liberals believe in. He does believe in those things.
Mike, I'm going to ask you to hold on to your thoughts there. Let's go through to SABC News reporter Natasha Piri with the earliest reactions from this announcement. Natasha, what are you hearing where you are?
I'm actually joined by the Provincial Secretary of the ANC in Johannesburg, Dada Morero, and of course he'll just talk us through their reaction as the ANC. Dada, we've heard it from the Mayor Herman Mashaba saying that he is stepping down and will be stepping down on the 27th of November. I mean, as the ANC, how do you actually react to this news?
Firstly, let me correct, I'm the Regional Secretary, not Province. We're not surprised as the ANC. We had expected that he will never finish his term, because governing in local government is not as easy as people think. And being a mayor of a city like Johannesburg, it's not so easy. He has, on a number of occasions, whispered to some of our caucus leaders that this thing of running local government is not child's play, and in fact, it's not his thing. So we're not surprised. And we are also convinced that, look, more than any other thing, this thing is based on the issues that the ANC have raised, that the financial position of the city is in dire constraint and it's about to collapse. And for him to suggest that they're in a good cash balance, it's not true. And we still maintain as the ANC that he is misleading the residents of Johannesburg. And at some point, the reports of National Treasury will prove that the ANC has been correct all along to say the finances of the city are in dire constraint.
And I mean, does this now give the ANC an upper hand coming to the local government elections in 2021?
Look, the DA is in disarray. Its leadership is unable to manage internal contradictions, and we are convinced that the DA, as we have always said, it's a white party. And they have proved that they are taking their party back. And those that went to the DA, especially who are of African descent, have actually made a serious mistake to have joined a party that has no interest whatsoever to address the interests of the African people.
That the way forward from now on, a new mayor has to be voted in. Just kindly explain that process to us and our viewers.
Yes, we have been invited to a meeting by our Provincial Executive Committee where discussions will start taking place by tomorrow. In those discussions, then we'll look at our options and make decisions and allow the internal processes of the ANC to take place. Secondly, it will also include us restarting discussions and negotiations with other parties that are in council, especially our partners and those that we think who shares to a large extent same views as the ANC. So we'll engage them, and we should be ready in the next few weeks to come back and say, are we fielding a candidate? This is the candidate, and so on and so on.
Coming to the issue of coalition governments, does the ANC believe in coalition governments?
The ANC position is that coalitions that are not based on common interests or common ideological stance are problematic. In this case, where the ANC has been working with its partners, the African Independent Congress, the Patriotic Alliance, and the Al Jamaa, we have, to a large extent, share the same ideological stance. And we think once you share the same ideological stance, it couldn't be a problem.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your time. Of course, we will catch up with him much more later. We were told that the EFF would actually be joining us. We're currently waiting for them, but of course, we will get those reactions. Just to take you and the viewers through, the recent developments. We heard there Mayor Herman Mashaba saying that he has resigned, I beg your pardon, from his position as the mayor, and of course, this is effective from the 27th of November. One would actually say that he was spitting fire because he had said that he had joined the DA because he believed in the values and the systems of, DA leader Mmusi Maimane. And of course, Helen Zille's election as the Federal Council chairperson indeed has dealt, Mashaba a blow, or the DA, as one would actually say. So, of course, one would actually ask that, what does this actually mean for the DA as a party? Does then this somehow suggest that, the future of Johannesburg somehow, hangs in the balance as Herman Mashaba is no longer the mayor of the DA? The local government elections 2021 is just around the corner. So it'd be quite interesting to see, what this actually translates for the party. Back to you, Desiree.
Thank you so much, Natasha. The ANC, quite a predictable response there, but the interesting part as well, saying the provincial leadership is already putting things in place to see who they can put forward as a replacement.
Yeah, I think that whoever they put forward, the outcome of that will be determined by the balance of forces on voting day in council as to who. So how the various parties will vote. But I doubt very much, if Mmusi Maimane has his way, that he would like the current coalition in Joburg to stay on, to continue. I don't think that whoever the ANC puts forward is going to carry the day.
Yeah, and Natasha also saying there that she's waiting for reaction from the economic freedom fighters. I'm seeing here on social media in response to our question of the day, which is about Herman Mashaba. Mystic Man El Malachi saying Herman Mashaba is a true fighter, bottom and Clar. The EFF, of course, Herman Mashaba giving lots of praise and thanking them for working with him. What are your thoughts on the working relationship between Herman Mashaba and the EFF throughout this time since 2016?
I think that the way that Herman Mashaba approached the coalition dynamics in Joburg would have surprised a lot of people. Of course, it would have annoyed the racial liberals in the DA. But I think that he
took a stand.
He took a stand, but also he made choices. And I think for him to be able to follow, as he calls it, a pro-poor agenda, having been put forward by the DA, I think that it was quite a brave thing to do. Knowing about the dynamics of his own party as to what was going. So he defied people's expectations because he came back from, remember, he's a business person, he's a capitalist, and he used to be the chairperson of the Free Market Foundation of all organizations.
I know. So
I think people, could not visualize at the time him being able to work with a party like the EFF. Which really is to the left on a lot of positions, is to the left of the ANC.
One of the fights he took on, and seemingly he wants to continue with the fight to the end, because he was saying that he wants to stay on until the 27th of November because he wants to continue the proceedings in terms of the interactions with Parliament about the Department of Home Affairs, and of course that takes you to that fight against xenophobia that seemingly at sometimes was creating the wrong perception around him. What are your thoughts around Herman Mashaba's fight against foreign nationals occupying a huge part of the city of Johannesburg?
Actually, I think it goes beyond the issues of the issue of foreign nationals, or being in the city either illegally or in a way that in a way that is detrimental to the proper management of the city, etc. I think it's in a broad sense. He believed in proper governance. in the city. That is why he was taking back the hijacked buildings in the city. He was disconnecting people who connected themselves illegally elsewhere in the city. You know, those kinds of things. That it is very important for law and order to be brought back in. I mean, you know, he's got that Buyam Teto thing that they have for Joburg. And I think most people in Joburg would agree that if you look at the Joburg CBD now and comparing it to what it looked like 20 years ago, it has actually deteriorated. Of course, like most other
So the
main
ANC
cities
is right, you're saying?
So he's right in
saying that things have not necessarily improved under his watch.
No. What I'm saying is that if you look at what Herman Mashaba has been trying to do to fix things in the city, he is trying essentially to fix what has gone wrong with the city. So because the city had actually, before he came into office, the city had deteriorated.
We're speaking to Mike Siluma, some analysis on the DA, the Democratic Alliance meeting over the weekend, and quite recently, as you saw now, breaking news, Herman Mashaba has resigned as DA member and as executive mayor of the city of Johannesburg. Let's go back to Natasha Piri for the latest in terms of reactions. Natasha, what's the latest?
Well, Desiree, I'm actually joined by Samu shop steward who is actually present at the briefing. We'll just get a brief reaction from Samu, as of course you know that they represent the workers here in the city of Johannesburg. So thank you so much for joining us on the SABC. Just for the benefit of the viewers, perhaps your name, your surname and your designation, please.
My name is Karabo Rangahuma. I'm a shop steward here in the Metro Center. Yeah.
Karabo, you heard what the mayor had to say. He's stepping down. Perhaps a reaction from the workers in the city.
Look, for the workers, I'll be honest with you, we feel it's something that has been long overdue. We've been praying for this. Actually, if it was according to us, we would be saying this man should have been doing this effective, you know, just right now, packing all the cars that he's been driven with, just entering into an Uber and going back home. Because as the city, we see him as a person, one who has divided organized labor in the city of Johannesburg. We see him as a person who presided over an era where 19 million, we have just discovered that 19 million of worker subscriptions have been, you know, used, and to our understanding as workers, this man said because there's waging factions within the worker organized labor, this man said then he will then take these monies, put them in a suspense account, so that the workers do not become victims of these two factions. And our understanding is that that money is in the suspense account. The money is in a total of 29 million. And sometime last week when we wanted the money to be transferred to the National Office of SAMU, we were actually met with some so-called statement of expenditure where the city that is led by Mashaba has spent 19 million of that money. So for us, it's not a loss. Actually, it's a gain. We just feel that these fruits that we have just gained today, had they been, if it was our choice, this man should have been going today, effective immediately, you know? Yeah.
Karabo, towards the end of his speech, he had outlined that and alluded that, you know, the city of Johannesburg is a much better led city under the DA-led coalition government.
That is politicking. You know, from a labor movement, if you can do your research here in the city, we have directors, deputy directors who are appointed without following the city's proper talent acquisition. We have pals, we have buddies. I'm saying in his seat, in his office, Mashaba, his chief of staff, within 2 months of taking office, he increased his annual salary by about 500,000, and which was before the normal annual increase, you know. So we can't say a city of Johannesburg, it's a better place to live in if you are close to his coalition partners, being the EFF and the DA. But other than that, there is nothing that we can say as ordinary workers that this man has brought changes. We have actually regressed. We have one of the most unequal work environment. We have people who are doing the same job, being paid different monies. We have a city that, you know, it's law unto itself. It continually disregards court orders that decisions have been taken in favor of the workers. So we are living in a city of lawless people. I'll give you an example. As some shop stewards, after uncovering the 19 million, actually we've been served with suspension letters. I have just received what is purportedly my suspension letter, I would obviously be taking it to the lawyers of SAMU to obviously advise on a way forward, So I'm saying we are living in an environment, a cowboy state, if I may call it. So I'm saying his departure, it's long overdue. And for us as workers, look, it's a win because the wage driver is going. A person who does not follow processes, he does not follow due processes. What he speaks, this man, he speaks left and walks right, and extreme right. So what he's saying is just politicking. It's something that if you can say, maybe yourselves as journalists, maybe let's make an undertaking and say, go to the city, the management, and say, give us actual finances of the city. You'll realize that he's presiding over a city that is on a 2.5 billion deficit. They operating on an overdraft. We all know when you operate on an overdraft, what is the situation. You can't say the finances are healthy. And why they can't be healthy, incompetent people are fired, people who are close to politics are go to JMPD, for instance. This process of hiring 1.5 JMP 1,500 JMPD officers. You must do your research. Check the relations of those people. We have also now discovered that somewhere in the revenue there were posts. All that their relatives and everybody has benefited. So we can't say we have lost anything as the workers.
Perhaps just one last question from me. What are the workers expecting from the new mayor, whoever's going to actually take over from Mashaba?
We would expect a person who, one, respects the law. Number two, a person who's transparent and a person of repute, not a person who hide corruption. This one that is going, we see a person who's been hiding corruption going. Maybe for the issues of exposing corruption, it can be a positive sign. But the person who's coming, he must not render us special favors, but he must abide by the law. City has got so many legislative frameworks that are governing it. We want a person who'd operate around those. Then I think the working relationship between the management and organized labor would be smooth.
Thank you so much for your time. Well, Desiree and the viewers, there you have it from Karabo, SAMU shop steward who actually represents the workers here in the city of Johannesburg, basically saying that, Herman Mashaba's resignation actually is long overdue. And as the workers, they somewhat are delighted that he has now vacated his position. We will keep those reactions coming in. We're still waiting for, the EFF PR councillor. And as soon as we get that, of course, then we will talk to you later. As for now, it's back to you in studio.